The first year of climbing is when climbers tend to see the quickest amount of progress. I remember as a new climber getting my first V1, V2, V3, and V4 within the span of months. I'm a few years into my climbing journey, and let me tell you, progress does not happen that fast anymore. Because if I was jumping 4 grades every few months, then I'd be a better climber than Yanya. The first year of climbing is a critical period for climbers to build good training habits, a positive mindset, and also a community that will support their goals. If I could go back in time and redo my first year of climbing, here are the 5 tips that I would share with my beginner climber self. If there's one tip I would want you all to take away from the video, this is the tip, and that is to climb intentionally. As a new climber, I was advised to climb a lot and get in a lot of mileage on the wall. And while I do think that mileage is important for newer climbers to familiarize themselves with like different hold types and also navigating different types of terrain, climbing a lot doesn't necessarily mean that you're learning a lot. And here's why. Say we have 2 climbers, the Campus Crusher and the Slab Slayer. I know the names are cheesy, but just bear with me. Campus Crusher really loves roof climbs, and any chance that they have to do a roof climb, they'll do it. On the other hand, the Slab Slayer loves slab, and they refuse to do any climb with any type of angle on it. Say that both of these climbers are advised to climb a lot. It's important to remember that their favoritism towards specific holds or specific type of walls are going to impact the type of mileage that they're doing, in the sense that they're just going to be climbing more of the things that they're already good at. Sure, they are putting in mileage, but that doesn't mean they're being intentional about working on their weaknesses. They basically lose out on building their body awareness and all this technical knowledge because of their favoritism for specific holds and for specific walls. The key for new climbers to see long-term progress isn't just to climb a lot, it's to climb a lot with intention. For me, a person who's willing to climb intentionally is willing to do these 3 things. 1 is to diversify the type of walls that they climb on, whether that be slab, overhang, slightly overhung. They might not like it all, but they'll still do it all. 2, work on a variety of grip types, such as crimps, slopers, pinches, and more. And 3, repeat the problems that they've already climbed with better technique. Regardless of what stage of climbing you're at, climbing intentionally is going to support us in allowing us to be more realistic about our strengths and our weaknesses as well. And then we can use this knowledge to make more tangible, concrete efforts to improve ourselves as climbers. Okay, now you might be thinking, how do I climb intentionally? Well, in my own climbing, I've practiced intentionality by doing 2 things. The first is to repeat problems. For example, on this V1 that I was climbing at Long Beach Rising, I felt like my flash attempt was pretty good. My technique was smooth. I didn't feel like I was struggling too much to get to the top of the wall. But I did notice that I was gripping onto the holds a little bit tighter than I actually needed to. I decided that I would want to repeat this problem, but with intentionality in how hard I was gripping the holds. As I was going up, I was telling myself mentally that I needed to grab it a little bit lighter so that I wasn't exerting more energy than I actually needed to on the climb. Even though you might not be able to visibly see the differences in the 2 ways that I'm climbing, I do believe that prompting myself to be a little bit more mindful of how hard I'm gripping on my warm-up holds will support me when I'm trying more challenging climbs that require me to be even more efficient with my energy. I've noticed that when I'm watching my climbing heroes such as Margot and Nina Williams, they seem to have a pretty effortless way of just ascending up the wall. And it's definitely not because they're using different or more groundbreaking techniques. Elite climbers use the same foundation of climbing techniques that we all use, but they just do it a little bit better. Another way that I've been working on climbing more mindfully is to focus on my weaknesses during my warm-up. For example, as a climber with smaller hands, I do find large slopey holds to be a little bit more challenging. To improve in this area, I've taken a little bit of time during warm-ups to find slopers or larger holds instead of gravitating towards like the jugs and the crimp lines that I would usually go for during my warm-up. I do find that warm-up is a pretty good time for me to work on my weaknesses because I'm still dedicating a portion of my sessions to working on my weaknesses, but I don't feel like it's taking away all of my time away from my projects or other things that I really want to focus on. You know the feeling. So you're climbing a boulder smoothly and effortlessly, but as you're getting higher, you're becoming a little bit more aware of just how high up you are. You're getting a little bit nervous, you're getting a little bit shaky. You know the pads are soft, but still you're feeling pretty anxious about the fall. And before you know it, you botch the top out. Every climber's worst nightmare. Okay, so it might sound a little bit ridiculous to practice falling, but this is a way for you to build up your mental game. One way to overcome your fear of falling isn't just to keep climbing, it's to practice falling with intentionality. Can you see a pattern here with these tips? The great thing about practicing falling is that you don't actually have to set a time to fall because it's an inevitable part of our sport. The first thing that you'll need to do is you need to find out what height you're uncomfortable falling from. For example, in this boulder problem, I'm checking to see when I'm uncomfortable falling from. Is it the bottom section? Is it the middle section? Is it the very top? In this first step, I'm not asking you to fall just yet. Down climb when you reach a point that you feel uncomfortable falling from. Step number 2. Okay, so now that you've built awareness of where you're uncomfortable falling from, it's now time to check your falling technique. According to the Tufas Boulder Lounge, I hope I'm saying that right, they suggest that you widen your stance. Your feet are shoulder width apart. Tuck your heads and limbs into your body by bringing your arms across your chest. On impact, bend your knees and roll onto your back in one fluid motion. I would suggest practicing this motion near the bottom of your warm-up climbs at the beginning of your session in order to familiarize yourself and also remind yourself of that movement again. If you are looking for a few more resources on how to properly fall, I've included the links to those resources in the description box below for you all. Step number 3, it's actually time to fall now. So remember earlier how we broke our wall into a bottom, middle, and top section? These are going to be your practice fall points. With time, maybe you'll feel really comfortable falling from the bottom and the middle section, but the top section is where you're most anxious and hesitant. For me, I do choose to do fall practice when I'm warming up so I can pay just a little bit of extra attention to it. I will generally pick 2 or 3 climbs that I'm gonna practice falling from the top or near the top of because I am comfortable with falling from the middle and the bottom section. Even as someone who does practice falling consistently, I'm not gonna lie, falling from the top still freaks me out every time, and I do try to avoid it when I am doing my projects, but like I said, it's just an inevitable part of our sport. I've just come to understand that for some of us, falling will always be uncomfortable. And while these falling drills may make you feel nervous every session for a long time, you are slowly building awareness and knowledge on how to fall, and that is power. So when the time comes when you do take an unexpected fall, your body has that muscle memory to engage itself and support you in falling safely. Okay, I know what you're thinking. What does making friends have to do with having a successful first year of climbing? Well, let me tell you. I remember being a new climber and hopping on to my little V1 while a climber next to me was crushing their V7 that I knew I couldn't possibly hang off of. I felt like I was kind of taking up space in the gym and that I was interrupting someone else from doing their project by working on my V1. But newsflash, you have a project too, and you are deserving of taking up space within the climbing gym. Some days I do really love going to the climbing gym and putting on my headphones and just climbing quietly and zoning out. But I do think that community is what makes our sport stand out from other sports. In other sports, there's an element of consistency that athletes can rely on and train for. For example, in swimming, you're swimming either backstroke, breaststroke, butterfly, or freestyle. In soccer, your team needs to score a goal on the opposing team's net. The rules and techniques that govern each of these sports are, in general, pretty consistent. And while climbing is fairly consistent in terms of the technique you can use and also the hole types that are available, the boulders and the problems that we're solving are always changing. Physical capabilities aren't enough to get you to the very top. you need to be able to problem solve also. Even on the world stage and at the elite level, climbers still find strength in their communities, and this can be seen when they're sharing data. There's an African proverb that goes along the lines of, if you want to go fast, go alone. But if you want to go far, go together. And I think that climbing really epitomizes this. For me, having a community of people that align with my values as a person and also my climbing goals has allowed me to push myself to try and even complete projects that I didn't even think were originally possible. Climbing is a sport of possibility, and there's no better feeling than projecting with your friends and someone makes this crazy breakthrough with their beta and suddenly the climb is possible. And the sum of these breakthroughs that we make together as a group, as a community, is how we complete our projects. My community has also supported me in navigating the learning curve when it comes to outdoor climbing. I remember when my friend group and I started climbing, we had no idea how to start outdoor bouldering, but we did figure out the learning curve together. We learned how to book campsites, spot safely, pad stack, read a guidebook, and more, and it was so much fun because we got to do it together. Okay, so now that you understand just how important a climbing community is, how do you find and or build one? First, you can check to see if there are any group or community meetups at your local gym. At pretty much every climbing gym I've been to, there's always a bulletin board available where they'll have a calendar or they'll post events that are coming up that month. For example, in Los Angeles, there are groups like Lagartijas or Lady Crush Crew who create meetups for people belonging to marginalized communities in order to meet up and support each other in their climbing journey. For me personally, I didn't find my community through a meetup. Most of my climbing friends that I've made have been through working on a problem indoors or outdoors together. Funnily enough, asking people for beta is a great way to start a conversation with someone. If you've seen someone a few times now and maybe you've projected with them before, my go-to is always to invite them to like a quick boba run or in and out afterwards with my group and I. Just don't be creepy about it. When you're watching the IFSC or videos of the world's best climbers wearing aggressive climbing shoes, like the La Sportiva Solutions or the Scarpa Dragos, it is really easy to connect high performance with aggressive shoes. But let me debunk that. In an article by climbing.com, Matt Glincy, a sales manager for Scarpa North America and a sneakerhead himself, suggests that you do want to have a shoe that performs at the highest level, depending on the style of climbing and the style of rock that you're climbing on. I want to emphasize that highly aggressive shoes does not equate to high performance shoes. Aggressive shoes simply refer to the shape of the shoe, while performance refers to the quality and the ability of the shoe. There is a high performance shoe in every category, regardless of the shape of the shoe, whether that be moderate, aggressive, medium stiffness, soft, or more. As I recommended earlier, newer climbers should be focused on climbing a variety of boulders and terrains in order to build their technical knowledge and also their body awareness. At the beginning stages, you will most likely be exploring the type of holds that you really like or the type of terrains that you like to climb on and that you're really good at. You would benefit more from working on and improving on your technique. I would discourage newer climbers from zoning in on a niche because that can change with time. In the beginning of my climbing journey, I thought that slab was the only type of climbing I wanted to do until I put more time and a little bit more training into climbing slightly overhung climbs that required more body tension. I found out that these slightly overhung climbs are actually the type of climbs that I'm best at and that I really love doing. But if I had specialized in slab earlier in my climbing journey, I might not have ever discovered that I was a good slightly overhung climber. You would really benefit from working on and improving your technique through intentional climbing rather than improving your technique by purchasing a $200 pair of shoes. Shoes don't improve technique, intentional climbing does. Before you invest in an expensive or high performance shoes, I would consider some of the following things. 1, if you are using this shoe as an everyday shoe, just be mindful that using it daily might burn through the rubber a little bit faster. And you might want to consider if you are willing to pay for a new pair of high performance shoes every few months in order to replace the rubber. If you are working on a specific project or specializing in a certain type of climbing style like crack or slab, then yes, a pair of climbing shoes that will support you in that style of climbing might be really helpful. Just consider your budget and the amount of use you're gonna get in your shoes before you go out and purchase one. My last tip for you all is to reframe your idea of what a successful first year of climbing might look like. When I first started climbing, I defined my success as simply increasing the grade that I was climbing at. When I climbed my first V3, I was already thinking about when I was gonna climb my first V4. And likewise, when I climbed my first V4, I was already thinking about when I was gonna climb my first V5. I had the sense that being a successful climber meant climbing and improving in the shortest amount of time. If I could go back in time, I would tell my younger beginner climber self that this grade chasing mentality is rooted in ego. It intertwines my climbing success with a pretty arbitrary number. And if we're being honest with ourselves, anyone can improve their climbing grade by finding a project or climb that suits their climbing style and their strengths. But just remember that in a lifetime of climbing, the first year doesn't tell you the trajectory that you're headed at. Perhaps you'll really grow into your climbing potential a few years down the road. For me, my climbing philosophy has shifted away from breaking grades to focusing on developing my technical knowledge by diversifying the type of boulders and the type of movement that I climb, regardless of the grade the boulder is. If it took me all session to work on a V2, I'd be happy to work on that V2, because clearly if I need to work on it, then there's something there that I'm not getting, and that trying on this problem is only going to help me improve in the long run. In my eyes, the climber who quote-unquote wins isn't the one that has a successful first year. It's one that is able to experience a full lifetime of climbing. These are all the tips that I wish someone would have told me my very first year of climbing. Thank you all for taking the time to watch today's video. I am so grateful that you're here. Don't forget to be kind to your mind, and I'll see you in the next video.